In July 1970, a U.S. Air Force Athena missile carrying radioactive cobalt launched from Utah, programmed to hit White Sands. But mid-flight, something deep in the Mexican desert seized control. The rocket didn't just malfunction, it was pulled violently off course, screaming past its target and nosediving into the Mapimi biosphere. It wasn't a crash, it was an abduction by the Earth itself. Welcome to the Zone of Silence. This isn't just a patch of dirt, it is a magnetic vortex where the laws of physics go to die. Here, radio signals don't just fade, they are swallowed by a wall of heavy, suffocating static. Pilots avoid the airspace, and if you stand on this cracked, sun-baked Earth holding a compass, the needle won't point north. It spins in a dizzying, endless circle, unable to find an anchor in reality. The landscape looks like a hallucination from a different timeline. The prickly pear cacti turn a bruised shade of violet under the relentless sun. Prehistoric tortoises, giants that haven't changed for millions of years, crawl slowly over ground littered with dark, heavy metal. This specific coordinate acts like a cosmic magnet, ripping meteorites from the heavens with impossible frequency. But the rocks aren't the reason locals refuse to drive here at night. When the sun drops, the silence gets louder. Pale blue orbs float silently above the jagged mountain silhouettes, moving with intelligent purpose. Witnesses report tall, shimmering figures standing on the horizon, humanoid shapes in silver skins that look like heat waves given form. They watch, they wait, and then they vanish into gusts of sand without leaving a single footprint. You try to call for help, but your walkie-talkie is dead weight. The signal bars drop to zero. As the sky bleeds into a deep crimson sunset, you realize the isolation is absolute. This is a blind spot in the universe, keeping secrets that simply do not belong to us. 3 scientists drove into the heart of the Mexican desert on a clear Tuesday morning and simply ceased to exist. Their white research jeep was found days later, idling in the heat with the doors wide open. A notebook fluttered on the passenger seat, and a half-eaten lunch sat spoiling on the dashboard. But the men were gone. This isn't a kidnapping case. This is the Mapimi biosphere, an isolated patch of the Chihuahuan Desert, better known as the Zone of Silence. It sits on the same latitude as the Bermuda Triangle and the pyramids of Giza, and here, the laws of physics seem to break. Radio signals don't just fade, they are aggressively swallowed by an invisible magnetic vortex. Compasses spin uselessly. You are completely cut off from the rest of the world. On the day of the disappearance, the team was tracking strange atmospheric anomalies. Recovered logs suggest their equipment started screaming, not with data, but with a mechanical terror. Villagers describe seeing the men standing by their vehicle, looking confused, as the air around them began to shimmer. They didn't run, they didn't fight, they distorted. Like a corrupt video file, their bodies became translucent, phasing in and out of visual reality until the desert simply wiped them away. Rescue attempts turned up nothing but sun-bleached cattle skeletons and strange metallic meteorites scattered across the sand. At night, the horror continues. Locals refuse to enter the zone after dark, pointing toward emerald green lights that pulse rhythmically against the mountains. These aren't stars, they hover low, scanning the ground with a cold intelligence. Today, a single pair of dusty sunglasses lies on the cracked, salt-encrusted lakebed, a plastic relic of a timeline that ended abruptly. From high above, the desert looks peaceful, but it is actually a dark, impenetrable void. The Zone of Silence doesn't just hide secrets, it consumes them. It wasn't a mechanical failure that doomed the U.S. Air Force's Athena missile. It was something waiting in the dirt. July 11, 1970. A routine test launch turns into a spiraling nightmare. The silver fuselage doesn't just drift, it gets violently dragged 400 miles off course, plummeting into the desolate heart of the Mexican desert. NASA scrambles a recovery team to the impact site. Engineers in white short sleeves and skinny ties drop into the Mapimi Biosphere Reserve, expecting a standard cleanup operation. Instead, they step into a graveyard for physics. This is the zone of silence. As soon as boots hit the sand, the rules change. High-tech Geiger counters don't just click, they scream erratic, distorted static before dying completely. Compasses ignore the poles, spinning wildly like broken watches. You can see the panic setting in. Men accustomed to precision are suddenly tapping dead radio headsets, shouting orders into a vacuum. It's not just that the equipment is malfunctioning. It's that electromagnetic waves are being physically bent and snapped by the atmosphere. The environment itself feels hostile. Jagged rock formations jut out of the ground, heavy with magnetite. Even the biology is corrupted. Strange, purple-tinted cacti grow in twisted knots found nowhere else on Earth. The locals warned them about this place. They spoke of a magnetic vortex that swallows sound and drags debris from the upper atmosphere like a magnet pulling a needle. It took weeks to haul the wreckage out on a custom-built railroad. They scraped up tons of radioactive topsoil, trying to bring the anomaly back to the lab, but the silence stayed behind. Today, modern navigation systems still glitch over these coordinates. A digital no-signal icon is the only greeting you get. We think we have mapped the entire world, but as the sun dips below the horizon, turning the sand a deep, eerie crimson, the desert reminds us of the truth. The Athena missile wasn't lost. It was taken. They say radio signals go to die in this patch of Mexican desert, but if you look closer at the soil, you realize the silence is actually a scream. This isn't just the dead zone for technology, it is an evolutionary pressure cooker unlike anywhere else on Earth. Decades ago, biologists opened their journals and sketched things that simply shouldn't exist. Today, we can see they weren't hallucinating. In a normal desert, prickly pear cacti are green to absorb sunlight. Here, they have mutated into a deep, bruised violet. This isn't a disease, it's a desperate biological shield, a pigment shift designed to block UV radiation so intense it threatens to warp the plant's very DNA. But the anomaly doesn't stop at the flora. Look at the ground. That isn't just a rock. It's a fragment of a magnetic meteorite, and the life here has learned to use it. Iridescent beetles don't just crawl, they navigate using a metallic shell that reflects sunlight in swirling, kaleidoscopic patterns, acting like a living compass in a place where man-made needles spin uselessly. Even the giants of this wasteland have been altered. The Bolson tortoise, a prehistoric relic, drags a shell far larger and thicker than its cousins, moving slowly through a forest where shrubs refuse to grow randomly. Instead, the vegetation twists into perfect geometric circles, their roots enslaved by the magnetic anomalies pulsing beneath the crust. As the sun sets and the heat haze breaks, the strangest adaptation reveals itself. This flower doesn't just bloom, it glows. A faint phosphorescence lights up the petals, a ghostly beacon for pollinators in the pitch black. We spend billions searching the stars for alien life, completely missing the fact that the zone of silence has already built an alien world right beneath our feet. In 1822, the night sky over the Mapimi Desert didn't just light up, it shattered without a sound. A massive fireball tore through the atmosphere, slamming into the earth with enough force to birth a legend, yet leaving a silence so profound it felt unnatural. Locals whispered that the heavens were falling, but it wasn't until a century later that we realized the earth here wasn't just catching stones, it was pulling them in. By the 1930s, geologists arrived in rugged wool and leather expecting a standard survey. What they found defied logic. Their compass needles spun wildly, refusing to find north. They mapped crater after crater, a graveyard of charred, metallic rock scattered across the white sands like buckshot. This wasn't a coincidence, it was a target. Fast forward to the space age. NASA set up camp, their pristine white lab coats stark against the dusty scrub. They brought reel-to-reel computers and massive dishes to track the Athena rocket, but the desert had other plans. The equipment glitched, radio signals died mid-air. When they picked up the heavy, dark stones littering the ground, the rocks clung to their tools with magnetic ferocity. We finally saw the invisible truth. The zone of silence sits under a bulging, twisting knot in the Earth's magnetic field. It acts as a celestial magnet, dragging iron-heavy debris out of orbit and guiding it to this exact patch of dirt. Today, the craters remain, silent witnesses to a cosmic bombardment that never really stopped. As the Milky Way rises above the jagged horizon, you have to wonder, is this just a magnetic quirk of geology? Or is the desert still waiting for the next big catch?
The needle didn't just twitch. It slammed hard into the red and locked there, screaming against the glass. In the middle of the Mexican desert, silence isn't empty. It's radioactive. It was July 1966. We were trekking into the Mapimi Basin, carrying heavy brass surveying gear into a void where radio signals go to die. Locals warned us about the silent stones, but we were men of science. We didn't believe in curses. We walked for days across blinding white salt flats where the heat waves are so thick they look like water. Then we found the debris field. It looked like the aftermath of an explosion frozen in time. Dark, jagged meteorite fragments embedded in the white crust. When Dr. Aris lowered the probe toward a cluster of black crystals, the clicking became a solid wall of noise. This wasn't just background interference. The ground itself was weaponized. We retreated to the wind-blown tents to document the find, but focus was impossible. The ink smeared under our sweating hands. The heat maps we drew turned into a single, overwhelming blob of danger. We were exhausted, pale, wiping dust from our eyes. But the fatigue felt wrong. It was deep in the bone. Even the film in our cameras was degrading, flickering artifacts burning into the negatives from the radiation leaking through the lens. Nightfall revealed the true horror. In the pitch black, the specimen on the table didn't need a lamp. It pulsed with a sick, pale luminescence, casting long shadows across our worried faces. We realized then that the zone isn't just a desert. It's a scar on the planet where the atmosphere fails to protect us. We left the next morning, but looking back from the air, that patch of Earth looks innocent. It's not. It is a beautiful, hazardous void, waiting for the next fool to step inside.
They were told the desert was dead, but on a quiet Tuesday in 1948, the desert decided to wake up and scream. In the Mapimi Silence Zone, the ground is usually a cracked mosaic of bone-dry clay, baking under a relentless Mexican sun. A small team of geologists had pitched their canvas tents on the hardpan, convinced that the only danger here was the dehydration and the silence. They were hunting magnetic anomalies, completely unaware that they had set up camp in the throat of a dormant monster. For weeks, the only sound was the wind hissing through dry brush. Then, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a gradual change. The horizon didn't shimmer. It turned a bruised, violent charcoal. The air pressure dropped so fast that ears popped, and the hair on their arms stood up from the static charge. A low vibration started in the soles of their boots, a rumble that sounded exactly like a freight train barreling through a canyon that didn't exist. They didn't see the rain fall. They saw the earth move. A 10-foot wall of chocolate-brown water, ripped cacti, and boulders surged through the dry arroyo. It hit the camp with the kinetic energy of a bomb. Heavy wooden crates splintered instantly. Irreplaceable radio equipment and leather-bound journals, months of data, were swallowed by a churning vortex of silt and sand. There was no time to pack. Panic became primal. The scientists scrambled up the jagged rocky outcrops, lungs burning, watching their temporary home dissolve into a violent river in seconds. As quickly as the violence arrived, the water vanished, sinking into the parched earth like a magic trick. Looking at the grainy, black and white photographs from that day, you see the chaos frozen in silver halide. But shift the view to a modern satellite feed and the story changes. You don't see the debris. You see the scars, ancient, sun-bleached veins carved into the desert floor, proving that even the driest places on Earth are just waiting to drown.